Diana?
Well, thank you, Louise. And a news conference is also underway in Haikou, the provincial capital of Hainan. And Sue Lannon is standing by there, but we'll go back to Sue in a minute. And there were a number of signals from Beijing earlier today that a resolution was near. And Louise Wong has filed this report from Beijing earlier.
A simple word was quoted in China's state media today that's been one of the biggest stumbling blocks in the diplomatic dilemma. Mainland newspapers conceded that US Secretary of State Colin Powell had said sorry over the weekend to express his sentiments on the fate of the missing pilot. CCTV also reported on what's been described as a move by the US towards resolving the tense standoff following the collision 11 days ago.
US Secretary of State Colin Powell has admitted that the ill-fated US ER-3 surveillance plane did violate China's airspace and said he was sorry for that.
One academic suggested this would ease pressure on the government to press for an apology.
我认为这个标题至少就是可以起缓和群众情绪。就中国现在不需要群众把这个表示多愤慨，作为他外交的后盾。
The public is also being eased into the idea the pilot may well be dead. Navy Vice Commissar Hu Yanlin was quoted as telling Wang Wei's wife his chances of being found alive are diminishing. We cannot avoid facing unfortunate facts we do not want to see. Louise Wong, TVB News, Beijing.
And as we said earlier, a news conference is also underway in Haikou, the provincial capital of Hainan Island. And Sue Lannon is standing by there. Sue, can you tell us what formalities need to be taken care of before the crew's release?
Yes, there's a number of things that need to be done, but of course we don't really know the details yet. I must add that Chen Se, who is a spokesperson from the Hainan provincial government, basically just read the statement from Foreign Minister Tang Jiashuan. So we don't really have any information on what is going to happen and when it's going to happen. Lots of logistics need to be worked out. For example, how are the crew going to get out of Hainan? They don't have any travel documents. That's because they were on a spying mission, and they do not carry any on the spying missions because they were not expecting to go to another country, as one of the members of the US team told me. Now, also there is a chartered plane being considered, but the officials here in Hainan will not make any comment as yet. They say the options are still open, and there are a number of options, and one of those is a chartered plane.
Thank you, Sue. In Hainan, the atmosphere surrounding the standoff had noticeably relaxed prior to tonight's announcement. The White House, however, had complained the U.S. flight crew had been questioned by Chinese authorities about the April 1st mid-air collision. And Sue Lannon filed this report from Haikou earlier today.
White House spokesman Ari Fleischer told reporters that authorities on Hainan Island have questioned the crew of the EP-3 spy plane about their collision with a Chinese fighter jet. The White House says they're being talked to one by one about the incident, but the US diplomatic team sent to Hainan Island to monitor the crew's well-being say they cannot comment. The team has become more upbeat in recent days with what's starting to look like regular meetings with the crew. They say they're getting closer to unfettered access because no Chinese officials have been present at recent meetings, a demand made by team leader Brigadier General Neil Sealock. But State Department officials have expressed concerns the meetings are being monitored. Sealock and another US official met the crew for the 5th time last night.
The crew spent some time in thanking very much all those who are working hard behind the scenes to secure their release, for the national unity in particular that they are seeing and that they're hearing, because they are afforded the opportunity to see the newspapers and they are getting indications that the entire nation is behind them.
The crew, who are being detained in a military guest house in Haikou, are receiving copies of the China Daily, as well as articles from US newspapers passed to them by the diplomats. Emails from family are being given to them, and they can reply through General Sealock. He says President George W. Bush passed on his regards to the crew last night, as did Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. And he stressed while the crew is handling the situation very well, they're not taking it lightly. U.S. officials here are continuing to discuss with Chinese authorities what kind of travel documents the Americans may need to leave the country. A chartered plane is one option being considered for evacuation, but a spokesperson for the team says they're unable to say yet what kind of aircraft may be used. Sue Lennon, TVB News, Haikou, Hainan Island.
And the U.S. ambassador to China, Joseph Pruer, made this statement a short while ago.
I've just come from the Foreign Ministry with a meeting with Foreign Minister Tang Jichuan, and we have made substantial progress, and I will have more for you. Right now I have to go in and call my boss. Thank you. We are very much looking forward to that. Word will come out of Washington on that very soon. Thank you.
Chinese state television this evening showed the military searching for the missing pilots and his aircraft in the Hainan Island area. And what is believed to be debris from the collision could be seen. The Chinese military spokesman said the rough seas made the search difficult at times. Fighter jet pilot Wang Wei has been missing since his aircraft collided with the American spy plane on the 1st of April. And since that time, the American crew has been held on Hainan Island when its plane made an emergency landing there. Jeremy Austin has more on the incident and the ensuing standoff.
The U.S. Navy EP-3 surveillance plane made an unauthorized emergency landing at the Lingshui Air Base. The 24-strong crew was reportedly disabling sensitive equipment before it even touched down. Earlier that morning, the spy plane had been intercepted off Hainan by 2 Chinese F-8 fighters. It collided with one, sending the plane crashing into the sea. The pilot, Wang Wei, was seen parachuting out, but despite an extensive search, he has not been found. The crew of the EP-3 was detained on Hainan, and the plane boarded despite U.S. claims that it had sovereign immunity. As the two sides traded accusations on who was to blame for the mid-air collision, China demanded an apology from the Americans. The U.S. in turn demanded the swift return of its service personnel and its plane. Secretary of State Colin Powell said the U.S. had nothing to apologize for, as Washington maintained the incident happened in international airspace and said the mainland pilot had been flying dangerously. President Jiang Zemin, however, said the U.S. must accept full responsibility and called for an end to all American spy flights near China's coast. The missing pilot's wife, Ran Guo-chin, wrote to U.S. President George W. Bush saying he was mean in not offering an apology. He responded with what was described as a letter of compassion. And the U.S. gradually softened its position, President Bush publicly expressing regret for the loss of the Chinese pilot. Colin Powell went further, saying he was sorry. This was welcomed as a step forward by the Chinese, who gave U.S. officials more regular access to the detained flight crew. Behind the scenes, diplomats worked on the joint statement about the incident, which was finally to win the American flight crew's release. Jeremy Austin, TVB News.
In other news, in Hong Kong, Hang Seng Bank unveiled new service fees to take effect.
We're proud and thankful for their parents, and we can't wait for them to get home.
Bush came to office promising to take a tougher line against China, and may now have learned that China can play hardball too. But it's clear already that U.S. expressions of sorrow over the Hainan incident were not a sign of a more conciliatory approach.
There was nothing to apologize for. To apologize would have suggested that we had done something wrong and were accepting responsibility for having done something wrong, and we did not do anything wrong, and therefore it was not possible to apologize.
And with issues still unresolved, like U.S. demands for the return of the EP-3 surveillance plane, more tough talk appears in store.
We're sure going to try our very best to get the plane back. We consider it American property, and we want our plane back.
From the Pentagon and elsewhere in the Bush administration, it's also being made clear that Beijing's demands for an end to reconnaissance flights near China will be rejected. The full impact of the Hainan incident on Sino-U.S. relations remains to be seen.
Damage to relations, I think we've stopped this process that was unfolding before it became more serious. I think we'll just have to see how things settle out. This is not over. Some discussions will begin, and we still have our plane there, but this will all unfold in the days and weeks ahead. I don't see anything that isn't recoverable.
U.S. officials, meanwhile, have strongly denied that any secret deal was struck to win the flight crew's release. China has been pressing Washington for support on trade issues and Beijing's bid for the 2008 Olympics, as well as to curb arms sales to Taiwan. Jeremy Austin, TVB News.
U.S. military officials hope to learn more about what happened.
We need to be debriefed and briefed on the situation so we can get home to our families for Easter.
U.S. media are reporting that Osborne had been subjected to sleep deprivation tactics while in detention. Chinese officials had not threatened him, but had woken him in the middle of the night for questioning. James LaGilia, TVB News.
The American pilot has revealed more about how he struggled to save his plane after the collision with the Chinese F-8 fighter jet. And we get details from ABC News.
During his flight out of China last night, the pilot of the EP-3 told the remarkable story of how he kept his crippled airplane from going down.
He's a very big man, and that it took all of his bulk to control the aircraft.
Osborne said that just after the collision with the Chinese fighter jet, his plane went into a 5,000-foot dive at a 90-degree bank, about as close to being upside down as you can get. The family of crewman Rodney Young heard about the plunge from his perspective.
He said, Mom, I prayed, and he said after he said the prayer, you know, as he was doing his process of whatever he needed to do, he said after I said amen, the pilot got control of the plane.
At one point, Osborne considered having his crew bail out.
They thought about jumping off the airplane, preparing for evacuating the airplane. Then they got the airplane under control and thought about ditching. And then the next point, they got the airplane completely under control, realized that there was an airstrip there, and that's where they directed the airplane.
The flight crew has told U.S. officials their plane was flying on autopilot on a fixed course and altitude when it was struck by the mainland jet. China, however, maintains the U.S. EP-3 abruptly changed direction, hitting the F-8.
One of the just-released crew members and emailed home a few days before the April 1st accident to show how close the Chinese pilots fly to U.S. planes. The photos include one that, based on the jet's ID number, appears to be Wang Wei, the Chinese pilot killed in the later collision.
But with China still holding the $100 million surveillance plane, sources say Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld is sitting on far more damning evidence, photos and videotape that document hair-raising stunts by hot-dogging Chinese pilots, including, sources tell CNN, a video in which the nose of a Chinese fighter can be seen between the propellers of one wing of an EP-3 on patrol.
With Navy pilot Lieutenant Shane Osborne and his crew now free, the U.S. is no longer pulling punches about who is to blame.
The United States aircraft was operating in international airspace in full accordance with all laws, procedures, and regulations, and did nothing to cause the accident.
Based on initial interviews with the aircraft, say the U.S. EP-3 surveillance plane was flying straight and level on autopilot, not turning when the Chinese F-8 fighter approached rapidly from a 45-degree angle. It passed just under the left wing of the prop plane and then pulled up its nose to slow down, causing its tail to hit the EP-3's left outboard propeller. The Chinese jet then broke up, and debris hit the EP-3's nose cone, which in turn knocked out the inboard engine on the right wing. The badly crippled plane dipped to the left and did an almost 90-degree roll, dropping 5,000 to 8,000 feet and turning nearly upside down before pilot Lieutenant Shane Osborne regained control. Sources tell CNN Osborne considered ordering his crew to bail out. Then, after righting the plane, thought of ditching at sea. Finally, he decided he had a good chance of landing at the Lingshe Chinese military base that was only 40 to 50 miles away. Sources say Osborne and his senior chief were both models of control in the aftermath of the accident. And the talk at the Pentagon is that they may both be recommended for medals of commendation. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, the Pentagon.
Chinese President Jiang Zemin has not mentioned the return of the U.S. detainees while he's been on a six-nation tour of Latin America. Mr. Jiang is in Cuba, meeting with President Fidel Castro. The two are discussing ways to increase their nation's political and economic ties. At a state dinner, there was time for entertainment, including this performance by a group of children. On political matters, President Jiang made a point of rejecting all foreign interventions and threats against Cuba, a reference that was an apparent jab at the U.S. Well, for more on Jiang Zemin and his worldwide diplomatic agenda, go online. We have an in-depth special on the China-U.S. air.
防策略嘅重要部分，佢話會要求官員下星期三同中方官員會面時，質疑中方戰機點解要以危險方法攔截美軍偵察機。中國駐聯合國副代表沈國放就話，美國喺中國沿海地區嘅偵察活動對兩國都冇好處。如果美方繼續嘅話，中方唔擔保軍機碰撞事件唔再發生。佢話中方會深入調查中美軍機碰撞事件。相信需要一段時間先至會將美軍偵察機交還俾美方。有線電視記者鄺常報導。
信中國又話中美過去11日嘅僵局不利於發展兩國建設性關係，但白宮國家安全顧問賴斯暗示喬治布殊6月會繼續透過行政命令延長給予中國永久正常貿易關係待遇。而24個偵察機機員開始接受軍方查詢。一名美國高級外交官表示，當日偵察機喺陵水機場降落之後，武裝嘅中方軍人包圍偵察機，並用槍指住機員要佢哋落機。
回國嘅信並感謝佢哋。機員會喺當地逗留2日，期間會向軍方交代撞機以及被扣留嘅經過，重點包括佢哋被中方問話嘅內容。機師奧斯本嘅父母喺睇電視轉播見到個仔安全返國，感到好高興。而喺機員所屬基地嘅華盛頓州，已經有居民喺當眼地方懸掛歡迎佢哋返屋企嘅標語，預料佢哋會喺當地時間星期6返韋德比基地同家人團聚。亞洲電視記者沈達元報道。
咁而中美軍機碰撞事件當中，中國機師王偉仍然下落不明。喺海南，軍方同埋漁民繼續搜索，有近1000隻漁船加入解放軍嘅搜索㗎。到今日晏晝，海軍一共出動飛機113架次，艦艇108艘。王偉嘅太太阮國琴喺新華社嘅訪問當中話，佢支持北京准許美軍機員離境，佢理解美國機員家屬嘅心情。咁而海軍已經將王偉嘅父母由浙江送到北京嘅醫院繼續治療。